So we have a lot to do this evening, and mostly I want to continue celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut with you and tie things together as we continue to talk about putting God second with Donniel Hartman. I'm going to begin by saying something as I usually do. I don't know if you can see, but I'm not wearing blue and white. Can you see what's on my shirt?
Two giraffes.
Giraffes. Okay, and Batya asked me, why aren't I wearing blue and white? And of course, I had a reason. What do giraffes have to do with Yom HaAtzmaut? Or not just Yom HaAtzmaut, but with Israel in general? Why giraffes? What does it symbolize? And you know that there are no right
Noah's Ark
answers. What did you say, Simone?
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark. Okay. Well, it's a good thing.
I'm going to say it's the munitions factory.
Interesting. Okay.
They call it giraffe.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Thank you, Bev. I did not know that. Well, the giraffe.
I think it has to do with sometimes being a stiff-necked people.
Whoa. And that goes in line with what you just said. You've got to stay strong. I was thinking in terms of admiring this country who has stretched, I don't even know how to say it in English anymore, but stretched out its neck to help many countries, even countries we are not necessarily friendly with, and gone the extra yard. So that was the message. Now, I'm going to do a few things, as I said, and they're all going to tie in by the time we finish. I promise. So we didn't just get together to have a barbecue, even though Dayenu. And we didn't just get together to be together, but that would have been Dayenu as well. Of course, there had to be some other type of meaningfulness. And so I mentioned this when we had our Tu B'Shvat Seder, that I've grown accustomed to leading Feder Seders. And there is a tradition now, by the way, and that will tie in with what we'll be talking about, of having a Yom HaAtzmaut Seder. Now, we did not go through a Seder, but I did put together a Seder plate. And again, no right or wrong answers, but I'd like you to try to answer. So why on the Seder plate was there something sweet, that's a Reese's, next to a sour pickle? What do all of these have to do with Israel? Something sweet next to something sour. And the singers, musicians amongst you should be getting the answer rather quickly.
Advash ve'al ha'oker.
Yofi, Linda, okay? For the sweet and for the thorn, and we take it all. Now, I'm not giving you all the symbols, but just. So I had on the Seder plate, you can see this twisted pretzel. And I also had this single pretzel. What do they each have to do with the people of Israel, with Israel itself? Come on.
There's all kinds, all ethnicities. There are those who converted. There are those who were always in Israel, those who took a path around the world, wandering for many, many centuries, and finally have now returned to Israel after 2,000 years.
Very good, Joel.
We can hold ourselves straight and tall with pride, but in order to live there, you really have to be able to bend and twist.
Whoa, terrific, terrific. So you weren't able to bend and twist?
Oh,
long
don't
enough.
say that. Don't say that.
Okay, absolutely. And we are all in this together. And even if we are different, as Joel says, and we know that we are, that somehow there is some kind of unity, but we each are to maintain our own individual identity. And the last item, this is an Oreo cookie. By the way, did you know that Oreo cookies are parve?
Where?
Where? Oreo cookies?
Maybe in Israel. I don't know about here, though.
Oh, all right. I'm not sure. Could you check that out, please?
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
okay. So what does this Oreo cookie that has the dark and in the middle the white, and then again, a layer of darkness, what does that have to do with Israel? Creative people, come on.
That almost tells the story of our history. That well, I mean, even if you go back to creation, that there was darkness before there was light, and then God created the earth. That's number one. And in our history, that we have to go through these periods of darkness before we come into the light.
Beautiful. Anybody else? Yeah, we have moments of darkness, and maybe not just darkness from without, but we have difficult times amongst us, but then we come flying through. But then we know that the darkness is going to come again, but we never stop singing. Lo nafsik lashir. We will get back to this. So let me remind you, and keep all of this in mind as we proceed. Last week, Donniel Hartman declared to us that moral goodness does not require faith. You can be ethical without necessarily being religious. He then pleaded with us to put an end to God intoxication, where all we think about is God, and to God manipulation, where we think that we are the ones and we are better than others, and so God will approve of whatever we do. We have to put an end to this. He pleads with us to correct moral shortcomings. Today, Donniel stresses that putting God second, does not mean putting me first. That's crucial. It does mean putting the acher, the other, first. Now, I want to take a moment to discuss this word, achrayut, responsibility, that I actually came across last week. Responsibility, achrayut. Aleph is the first letter, and the last letter is tough. What do we know about Aleph and tough?
First and
Well,
last letters.
the first letter of the alphabet
And the
is
last
Aleph,
letter.
and the
That
last.
is the last.
So it's been suggested that achrayut, responsibility, means you take responsibility for all of life. And so that's why it begins with an aleph and it takes you all the way through to tough. What other word, two words, is in achrayut? Aleph, chet,
Acher.
Shin.
Acher.
Acher is other, and aleph chet is ach,
Brother.
brother. It's what I love about Ivrit, of how you build on the shoresh. So he says putting God second, again, doesn't mean putting yourself first. And he also wants us to be very aware that by putting God second, we are in no way relegating God to insignificance. Faith, he says, could very well be a necessary criterion for the fullness of a Jewish life. What he means to say is, yes, he made a case last week how if ethics is subverted because of religion, then something is wrong. But he's saying today, we're not just ethical people. There's more to life than just doing what is just and what is right. There are other elements to life. Spirituality.
I don't know.
He says, in addition, please mute as he goes on, that a core dimension of religious life is its aspirational feature. I'm going to say that again. A core dimension of a religious life is aspiring to. In the Torah, does it say in Sefer Vayikra, Leviticus, you are holy? No. What does it say? Anybody? You shall be holy. Kidoshim tihi you. That is a small phrase, but very, very meaningful. He stresses that that's what the religious life should be all about. That we are constantly striving. We might say that we are created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. But that does not mean to say that we are like God. We never will be, and it's going to be ongoing. And there's something in living the religious life. And I'm not just talking about doing this mitzvah and that mitzvah and that mitzvah. But living a religious life, he makes a case, is an attempt to leave mediocrity. I am always looking to reach higher heights. We have to push ourselves beyond our assumed limits. And he feels you might not need, again, to learn ethics from Judaism, and you can be good without being religious, but if you are religious, you have a chance to have a very full spiritual life and go from good to great. One of the key words in his book is aspiration. We are constantly on a road. Therefore, he talks a great deal about another two little words in the Torah, lech lecha. When Abraham is commanded to go, he sees that not just, as we've said before, as a one-time event, but that is a paradigm for us as human beings to always be going. And by the way, the word halacha comes from that same shoresh. Donniel, if he sounded a little down on religiosity last week, not at all. He begs us to heal the ills of religion because he so believes that religion can heal the human condition. Now, how? The first step is understanding that we are not God. Now, that might sound a little strange. Is there anybody, or has anybody in history ever considered him, themselves, as God? Is there?
Messiah.
The Messiah?
No,
I don't know about that.
no, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Nobody else has taken on the role of what we might say God might have done, or we can't believe that God would have done. But do we really not know? Because Donniel talks about this. If last week he came down on God intoxicated people, this week he's coming down on the 20th century, which has given us characters in the secular venue in the world of dictators and destructive leaders who have perceived themselves as God. This is a secular arrogance parallel to the religious arrogance, but how horrific these gods, as we are not far away from Yom HaShoah. This is quite a period of time. These secular leaders with this arrogance become the foundation also for racism, discrimination, oppression, and murder. So we're fighting two poles. He believes that if we really look at God as another who we cannot be like, nobody can be like, then that's setting the stage for us to look at everybody else in this world as being equal. Whoever, whatever we are. And if we follow that line of thought, then there is no opportunity for destructive self-interest. God should be looked upon as an agent who empowers us to live a meaningful and courageous life. It's, I said, quite a few days, the 3 days that stand out in the last week. Perhaps you have heard Zichrono Livracha of Rabbi Klein. And I stop and think of him now because his belief in God and Judaism led him to end his life in a very particular way as a commander in a unit in 2006. His sister went around traveling to interview the other soldiers who were in his unit. And there is a particular soldier who explains it was like something from the Agadah legends, from the time of Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Klein, 31, with 2 very little children, decided when he saw a grenade being thrown for him to fall on it so he could protect the rest of his unit. But the Agadah is, what were his last words? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. The moment that he was choosing to orphan his children from a father, to leave his wife, his young wife, a widow, he was feeling not that he was dying because God told him to, but that was giving him a sense, and this is what Donniel believes, that their life is so precarious, and you don't know what the next day is going to give you, or rather take away from you, that God is an agent for giving, in so many different cases, a sense of order, a sense of meaning. And I mentioned this Rabbi Klein because those are the kinds of stories we hear, and I trust that you have heard them in a different way, spent all day yesterday listening to. And we're going to get back to that. But faith, you know, what's that expression that they say? There are no atheists. When you're about to, there's something about that. Now, we should not have to wait till that moment comes to feel the presence of God. But another example that he'll give is from the Shoah. How God, when people had every right to be angry with him, did the following. The story of Rabbi Yonah Emanuel, Pesach within the bitter reality of the Shoah. I'm going to tell you a story that it took me 40 years to tell you. On the morning before Pesach, in 1945, I set out for hard physical labor in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, as I had done every day for the previous 2 years. I came back at night utterly and totally exhausted, as I did every night during those 2 years. I was 19 years old. My father is already dead. My older brother, Elchanan, was already gone. My younger brother, Shalom, was already gone. My younger sister was not among the living. The Bergen-Belsen camp was not an extermination camp, but a labor camp, and Jews died of the unbelievably hard labor, the terrible cold, starvation, and disease. I went to the hut where my mother was. She was very ill. I sat next to her and began to recite the Haggadah. We had no wine. We had no matzot. We did not even have any bread. Now he says that because there are other stories where Rabbi said, have the bread, God will understand, instead of the matzah. We only had one thing in great abundance, maror. There was a very great amount of maror, bitterness, in our hearts. I whispered the Haggadah, and I was not sure whether my mother heard me or did not hear me. But when I came to the blessing of deliverance and I said the words, so too, Lord our God and God of our fathers, enable us to reach future holidays and festivals in peace, rejoicing in the building of your city and ecstatic in your service, I felt comforted. How does that happen? He's there only because he's a Jew, but he's finding comfort and able to talk and pray and believe in God. There is something about this God figure that can empower us to find order, meaning, and strength. I might have told you this at another time, but an educator had come to Israel during this period of time, many years ago, and went to Har Herzl. This year, people were able to go, families, but just families. They were not allowing the millions that go, because everybody knows somebody you had to be because of the corona. But at that time, he went and he observed a family, and he saw in particular that the father was weeping. After the family left, he went over and he saw that he was weeping for his son who had died 10 years ago. He understood. The next day, he goes to Gan Sacher, near the Israel Museum, where everyone is barbecuing and music is playing. And by coincidence, he happens to see the same family. And he sees the same father who was wailing the day before is now dancing wildly. And he couldn't help himself, and he goes over to him and says, you know, I saw you just a few hours ago, yesterday, wailing. How can you be dancing today? What do you think this father answered him? I'm dancing to give meaning to my son's death. And I'm singing to God. Another example that is hard to understand. Now, Donniel is not just talking theoretically. He says, religious life provides me with a calendar designed to reinforce values. Values I'm meant to live by. So, this calendar gives me holidays filled with meaningful rituals and spiritual insight. As I perform a ritual or as I pray, I'm reminded over and over again of what is expected of me. When I'm praying, I'm not just saying thank you or please to God, he says, but I'm reading sentences there that are indicating to me, God does this, I should be able to. If it's God who visited the sick, I'm learning to visit the sick. Clothe the naked, I shall clothe the naked, etc. But mostly have an appreciation that life is a gift, and I acknowledge that before God. And if I didn't have this routine, I wouldn't acknowledge it. Maybe not 3 times a day, maybe not twice a day, but even once a day I might not. So this religious life provides me with daily rituals and rituals that we have experienced in these 3 contemporary, I don't know what to call them, days. An example of a ritual that might seem a little not so meaningful. Between Pesach and Shavuot, what are we meant to do?
Count the Omer.
Count the Omer. Why is that? Yes, very significant. Going from the Exodus to Shavuot, receiving the Torah. Why?
We're waiting expectantly and excitedly with bated breath to complete our journey. It's part of the journey, the mission.
Okay,
the Torah.
Joe, I agree with the first part, but the second part, when you said complete our journey, what did you mean by complete?
Complete, that was too strong a word. Okay. To carry on our journey towards holiness and our destiny. It's like something out of Star Wars almost, or somewhere. Our destiny is coming. A great day.
Bracha,
Yeah,
I think it's counting down till we get the instructions on how to complete our journey. Doesn't mean to say we're ever going to complete it, but we're going to get instructions on how to do it.
okay. Now, we put Joel and Marlene's answer together, and yes. So there is something in that ritual that takes a split second to say every night that number, that we are that much closer, but it's making me think about what Joel and Marlene just said. Now, there's a dialectic that we live within. And it's said in Sefer Shmot, just as they've crossed the Red Sea. Listen carefully. We say in the same pasuk, this is my God, and I will adore him, and the God of my father, and I will exalt him. What's being said there? Donniel points this out, very, very significant. And it's something that his father actually put in his mind in one of his books. This is my God, I will adore him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. What Donniel said last week, that we are made to take this tradition and make it our own. Not forget that it was first Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah's. But I can do both, but I have to make it my own. Because remember, autonomy, responsible autonomy. Linda said she was scared of what we do with that last week. Now, we're in a covenantal relationship with God. There are two paradigms Donniel and his father, David Hartman, discuss. And which is the preferable paradigm of covenantal relationship? There's the Exodus paradigm, and there's the Sinai model. Anybody want to take a guess at what the difference of these models are in how I'm supposed to perceive God and how I'm supposed to perceive myself as a human being? What would the difference be? The Exodus and the Sinai.
I think the Exodus paradigm was all in God's hands. I think that the Sinai paradigm, God was now shifting control of destiny to the people's hands.
Yafet.
That's nice.
There was an overwhelming divine power. And we talked about that. That's even why Moshe's not mentioned in the Haggadah. But when you come to Sinai, God has conferred responsibility, achrayut, on us. It's not, Donniel says, that the essence is we are obeying God, but as Marlene said earlier, God is giving us guidelines, some of which we might have thought of on our own, but some we would not have. And he's giving it to us, these mitzvot, again, not to make us submissive, but make us partners with him.
In Exodus, it's mainly fear of God. We got to follow or you're punished. And God is vengeful, and there isn't much for us to do other than follow blindly. And whereas there's so many more opportunities for serving God with the Sinai paradigm, with the halakha.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Which leads us to yesterday and today. I'm going to read a small section from David Hartman's, Donniel's father's A Living Covenant, because he refers to it in his book. And when he's talking about the covenant and enhancing our lives, he says the following: Israel can do so much for really bringing this covenant alive. I live with the guarded hope, and this ties into aspirations, not just personal, but national, being realistic. I live with the guarded hope that out of this complex and vibrant new Jewish reality will emerge new spiritual directions for the way Judaism will be lived in the modern world. Israel expands the possible range of halachic involvement in human affairs beyond the circumscribed borders of home and synagogue to the public domain. Jews in Israel are given the opportunity to bring economic, social, and political issues into the center of their religious consciousness. A case against God intoxication, that we are meant to live in this world and be involved. The moral quality of the army, social and economic disparities and deprivations, the exercise of power moderated by moral sensitivity, all these are realms that may engage halachic responsibility. And finally, from this perspective, the fact that Israel enables us to make the whole of life carrier of the covenant is in itself sufficient to ascribe profound religious significance to the secular revolt that led to Israel's rebirth. I celebrate Israel's Independence Day with the recitation of the Hallel Psalms, thus expressing gratitude for God for having been given the opportunity to renew the full scope of the covenantal spirit of Judaism. Now, how does this tie in with God giving us mitzvot and rituals? And we remember from last week that the Nevi'im rebuked Bnei Israel time and again for just being concerned with ritual. Here we have an opportunity, and where you have an opportunity to be involved with reality, there are dangers that you're not going to always succeed right away. But if you don't have the reality, if you don't have an army, it's easy to be moral. But you put to test your level of sensitivity by having an army. These thoughts are on my mind as we just spent yesterday and today in doing what is an annual ritual. Yesterday, Yom HaZikaron, rituals. We light the Ner Neshama. The siren goes off on Tuesday night and then again yesterday morning. People go to the various military cemeteries. And all day, you are listening either on the radio or on the TV to music that evokes feelings. But more importantly, the ritual of listening to stories of the fallen soldiers. And more significantly, listening to the bereaved parents, siblings, children describe how they continue. This These are rituals, modern day rituals. Yom Ha'atzmaut. So we mentioned Hallel. What is the Megillat Ha'atzmaut, the Declaration of Independence, Israel's independence? What is it written on originally? Anybody know?
I never knew. I don't know.
Was it
Not-
written on parchment?
Yes, again, says the lady who knew Giraffa. Ben Gurion specifically wanted the declaration to be written on parchment. Like what? Like the Bible. He might not have been observant, but we know he was a man who loved the Tanakh. And he expected that this declaration would be read regularly and insisted that it be considered part of our canon of Jewish sources. There is a tradition, and I listened to it last night, of reading the Megillah with a trope. And that was done yesterday. That's a ritual similar to the ritual, which I know was in Toronto for a long time already, reading those who created the Shoah Megillah. Why is there a need to do that? Why isn't the barbecue and singing enough? Why do you have these kinds of rituals? You're scared that if it stays just in the air, if you don't have something concrete, it will eventually disappear. We all need, no matter what age, concrete realities. As long as they make us feel and strive. And there is no way that you can participate, going back last week to Yom HaShoah, and yesterday, Yom HaZikaron, and today, and not be moved. But it can't be just a corny kind of move. But you pray that when you're sitting there and you're saying, look what that person did with his or her life, I have to, that it is concretized. It is concretized. Now, the transition from Yom HaZikaron that I mentioned, between the cemetery and Gan Saker and Yom Ha'atzmaut, that is also an incredibly profound, insightful plan. Do you remember, I don't know how many years ago, I guess there were several terrorist attacks in Israel, and the March of the Living, the office I think was in Montreal. They were thinking that they were only going to take the kids to Poland, but not continue on as they usually do to Israel. Does that ring a bell? Now, to be honest, I don't remember how it ended, what the decision was, but I know that there were many of us who felt, and when I repeated that just a few days ago, people agreed. You can't just take them to Poland and that's that. You have to end up here because you end up here for Yom Ha'atzmaut. All of these dates and days, they're meant to create a sensitivity. Now, I want to share with you some of these moments that we experienced last night in the ceremony that takes place on Har Herzl. And I will be sharing the screen and want to show you 4 clips. Every year, there is a ceremony on Har Herzl, and one outdoes the other. Last year, nobody could be present. Last night, many were, but you watch this on TV and such an experience. So the first clip, it begins with this singer, I'm sorry, I forget her name, and then the dance that you will see. You will not understand the words perhaps, but the theme for the evening was Achva Yisraelit. Achva, camaraderie, comradeship, fellowship, Israeli fellowship. And the people, every year, 12 people are honored to light the torch. Each story, you sit there and more moving than the previous. What this woman is about to sing about is so appropriate because of the year, and I've shared this with you throughout the year, of the tensions between people. But as the MCs of the evening said, when it really comes down to it, we know how to stick together. Yes, this is what aspiring is all about. We have a long way to go in bringing things to where they should be at. But it's a laboratory and you work in a laboratory. So just for your pleasure, notice her singing, but then how the dance reflects the message. You saw in the beginning, each of them like the single pretzel, and then they came together,
Right.
their costumes. And she was saying, we know how to get above and beyond our differences. One of the next numbers was dedicated to the medical, all types of medical staff that are constantly being praised here in how they dealt with this pandemic.
Sorry, could I ask that became one dress? They were all at the beginning.
Yes.
At the beginning, were they actually separate?
Yes, they were. That's just another miracle of Israel.
How do they do that?
You might recall, as I show you actually three individuals who will be lighting a torch or lit a torch last night. I don't know, last month or the month before, I'm sure that I mentioned to you of an Arab nurse up in Afula. So a patient, an observant patient who was about to leave this world, his family, because of the corona and the lockdown, wasn't able to reach the hospital. And this patient wanted to be able to say his goodbye to the world. And so it was this Arab nurse who helped him say, Shema Yisrael. Muslim. Thank you. Now, the other woman that was also honored is from Akko, as we meet them now.
המרכיבים את החברה הישראלית. תעלה המשואה.
אני נרג'ס אבו ימן, בת פאיז וג'מילה פארס.
ואני מאהר אברהים, בן תייסיר זכרונו לברכה, וחיריה תיבדל לחיים ארוכים.
מסיעים משואה זו. לכבוד האחיות והאחים של מדינת ישראל ולכל הצוותים בבריאות הציבור, בקהילה ובבתי החולים שנותנים את הלב והנשמה למטופלים ללא הפסקה, ובמיוחד בשנה הזאת במאבקם הבלתי מתפשר במחלת הקורונה. כל הכבוד לכם.
לכבוד כל העדות והמסורות שמרכיבות את החברה הישראלית, שהן השורשים המצמיחים אותנו, האור והחום שבלבנו, והרוח הדוחפת אותנו קדימה.
לכבוד העדה הדרוזית.
In honor of the Druze.
הוריי ומשפחתי הנפלאה, ולכל המשפחות שהאמינו שנוכל לנצח במלחמה בקורונה ונתנו עידוד, תמיכה וסיוע בשעה שאנחנו התמסרנו למטופלים שלנו.
לכבוד המשפחה שלי והילדים שלי והילדים של כולנו, העולם שלנו, ולכבוד החובה שמוטלת עלינו לעשות הכל, אבל הכל, לבנות עבורם עתיד של שלום, תקווה ואחווה. סלאם, אמל ואחווה. ולתפארת מדינת ישראל.
The glory of the state of Israel. No.
Was she the nurse who helped the man? Was
No. She's from Akko,
she's
and she is in charge. He was the nurse.
Oh, he was the nurse.
He was the nurse. Yeah. So
But
here
she's
a ceremony and talk about achva, not just between Jews, but between all of its citizens. Not always great, but nothing else needs to be said about that. Now, the last clip is an Ethiopian young woman who has been working for Mishmar HaGvul, the police, for the last 21 years. What she will be saying is that when she was in Ethiopia as a little girl, she always dreamed of being in Israel, but she never dreamed that it would be possible that she would be a shoteret, a policewoman, and certainly not lighting one of the flames. Now, as a policewoman, that's a difficult enough job, but she's also honored for all the work she does with many others off duty.
תעלה המשואה.
אני רב פקד הבטנש עדן, בת מריטו ווואסה, מסיעה המשואה הזו לכבוד כל השוטרות והשוטרים, המתנדבות והמתנדבים של משטרת ישראל ומשמר הגבול, שבשנה מורכבת מול איום לא מוכר עבדו במסירות נפש ומתוך תחושה אמיתית של שליחות למען אזרחי ישראל.
She's praising her fellow
לכבוד
officers.
המשפחות שלנו, לכבוד כל הדורות שהטמיעו בנו את החלום לחזור לירושלים,
And praising her
החלום
ancestors
שבזכותו
who gave her the
אני
dream of
כאן
coming
היום,
to Jerusalem.
לכבוד הילדה הקטנה באתיופיה,
And for
שלא
the little girl
דמיינה
in
שתזכה
Ethiopia
יום אחד לעמוד כאן במדים של משטרת ישראל ולומר את המילים ולתפארת מדינת ישראל.
משפחת אבטן שטפת חוגגת בקהל, בינתיים מסיעה המשואות כולם.
It's impossible, as I said, to not be moved, but we have not arrived where we're meant to be. Donniel will tell you, and he has a lot of criticisms of Israeli leadership and Israeli society, but you're only critical of something that you really love. But we have to continue to aspire, and aspire. I have nothing to add. I don't. I think you have been told that we are moving from Thursdays to Wednesdays. If you haven't, I'm telling you now. And I'd rather leave you. The last person that was honored last night was 102 years old. My brother-in-law says he didn't look like he was more than 80. No, I'm sorry, David said that. Yeah. But no, just very, very moving. And we need to be fine on the regular weekday, but we all need these special days in our calendar. And we need these rituals, not just the ancient, but we combine them with these, we call these 3 days the contemporary days. And we have to feel that we can still create rituals to give meaning to life, So I bid you the rest of Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach, and pray that things will get better. Amen. Okay, take care.
I just sent Merle the YouTube of the ceremony last night.
Yeah, I have it. You sent it to me on WhatsApp. Yep.
I sent it on WhatsApp. It's long and you don't have to watch the whole thing, obviously. But if anyone else is interested, I'm sure Merle will be happy to
figure out how
He's
to
looking
follow
for
it.
things
because
to do.
I don't know what it's called in English. I just, I put it up in Hebrew or.
Yeah,
But if you just copy the link, Merle, then you can put it onto email.
It's called the Israel torch lighting ceremony.
They have it up in English, Linda?
And you can get it on YouTube. I was watching it just before the class. Yeah, it's they do the translation. I don't know if they do the whole thing.
But a
You
lot
have
of it
to
is
watch
musical.
it for one
but-
reason.
Yeah.
Nachama, you didn't get back to me of how to translate something.
No, because I know how to do it. I just assumed you would ask me.
I'm asking you now.
Because you had enough to do. We all left Bracha's house after a wonderful afternoon. At 6 o'clock, I said, she has a class in 2 hours. We're all leaving now.
I appreciate that.
The final part of the ceremony is the transition of the two national flags, the flag of Israel and the flag of the official flag of the army, which are passed from one unit in the army to another, and that unit takes care of the two flags for the year. And then in this ceremony, they're passed over from one unit to another. But there is also, and that's very moving, the precision of it. The precision of it is just incredible. And they form different symbols. And you should really watch it because they make them very appropriate and connected to what's going on. So it's not just the Star of David and not just the menorah, but you also have the vaccinations. So you have to see it. Now, I know that sounds weird and I won't tell you, but they were all lined up and they actually look like they are syringes and going in and out. And that's the soldiers moving. It's something to watch. It really is. And it is moving. I'm sorry?
Okay.
The other
Thanks
thing
for,
I was
okay,
gonna
I'm going to
ask-
try to copy it into a link. I have to figure out how to do that because it's on my WhatsApp, but I'll figure it out.
A
You
question.
know what? I'll send it to your mail.
Send
Merle,
it to my email.
don't
That's
bother.
very
I'll send it
easy.
to you on email.
Okay.
Did each
Okay.
of them, after lighting the candle, say that phrase, something Latiferet Yisrael? We heard it from
Medinat Yisrael.
What is the whole three? What is it? Latiferet?
Latiferet Medinat
Israel.
So
Yisrael.
that was the last thing each of them did before lighting their.
Everyone
Yes.
says that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the lady with the Arab nurse who lit, was she also an Arab or a Druze?
Yes. Druze.
Jews.
And
what was her role that she was picked?
also in public health.
And that was doctors and nurses singing that
Is-
second
Yes.
one? They're
Yes.
all-
Is the
The Kulalu.
Israel Prize not done with these ceremonies and the 12 recipients of the Israel Prize? Is that done at this time too?
Next day.
Not today. It's not done last night.
Not last night, but I think on Yom Ha'atzmaut,
I think
maybe.
so.
Yeah,
We were
that's also
barbecuing.
something to watch.
Yes. Now, Batya just put on the chat the link. If you know how to
Oh,
open
good
that
job.
up.
Anyone is
Thank
welcome
you,
to click
Batya.
on it and then it will open up, or you can copy and paste it into.
Oh,
Okay, and if
Also,
Nechama
just click
sends
on
it
the
to me, I'm
link.
I
happy
sent
to,
it to you anyway, but
yeah, I'm happy to email it to anybody who wants it.
I just downloaded it and it said it's not, the video is not available in my
your
country.
country. Yeah.
No,
Oh.
I was.
there you go.
Is that quite a message? I don't know.
Yeah, I got the same message.
You can get it on
Oh, well, I
YouTube.
tried.
You can get it on YouTube.
I sent it to you, Merle.
Yeah, okay, because
All
I
right,
think
try.
it opened for me. I just want to say thank you, Bracha, because you know what? It's just having that taste of what a real Yom Ha'atzmaut feels
Yeah.
like in Israel. It's great
That
to
was-
recall that, and it's way
That was
better
our
than
thinking.
way better than anything here. Trust me on that one.
I know.
Right.
Okay. Should we sing Atikva? No. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Good
Let's
night.
Did already.
Bye-bye.